Alright, what's up guys? Austin here. We're going to be talking about my Week 8 NFL Draftkings picks. But before we get started, I'd like to talk about how I did last week with my picks. I had Lamar Miller, Todd Gurley, Stephon Diggs, Rob Gronkowski, and the Rams defense, who all did really, really good for me. And those picks were my base picks, which means I really had them in about every single one of my lineups that I made, and I switched around some QBs, some flex players, some wide receivers, and with the salary cap I had room to get Devontae Freeman and DeAndre Hopkins in most of my lineups, which means I basically had about 18 grand to spend with two players, and those are the two I went with in most of my leagues. And as you know, most of the weeks they put up about 30 points each, and unfortunately this week Devontae Freeman only put up 18 and DeAndre Hopkins only put up 11. So that really hurt my lineups a lot because with that extra 40, maybe 50 points, I could have placed really, really high around first place, somewhere in there. So I was pretty disappointed in that. I had John Brown was another lower one, but he still got a touchdown, 65 yards, so it was pretty good. But the Rams defense was huge, coming up with 25 points. I had them in every single one of my lineups. Like I said, that's what I do with my defenses. I roster them in every single one of my lineups, so that was a huge, huge plus for me. Um, really, this week I'm gonna do only my lineups in the Millionaire Maker one, so I'm gonna have about 8 lineups in that. Maybe a little bit more if I decide to spend the money and do it. But other than that, last week my top lineup, like I said, got 215 points, which is pretty good. And if I had the production from Devontae Freeman and DeAndre Hopkins, I could have gotten somewhere around 250, 260. Alright, so my favorite QB and wide receiver stack this week is going to be Philip Rivers and Keenan Allen. I have a few of the QB and wide receiver stacks I'm going to talk about towards the end of this video, but this is probably going to be the main one I do in my lineups. Um, Philip Rivers is throwing 300-yard games, 4 games in a row. That's pretty good production, and for his price, I'm surprised they haven't jacked up his price. But he's still 6,600, and at that price, if he's playing like he is, he's gonna have a monster game again. So at running backs, we have Chris Johnson and Todd Gurley. Chris Johnson is only $4,600, which makes him an instant choice in my lineups. I'm gonna have him in about every single one. He's getting the bulk of the carries. He's putting up big numbers, and at 4,600, I expect him to be highly owned, but that's okay because I expect him to put up at least 20 points this week against a terrible Browns defense, who is ranked, I think, 30th against the run. And then you have Todd Gurley again this week. His price jumped up to 6,300, but as good as he's doing, and I think he's going to do just fine, and he's worth spending the money for. He's going up against the 49ers defense, who's also terrible, so he should put up big numbers again this week for us. Yeah, wide receiver, I'm going to start with Martavis Bryant, who's $5,300. Like I have written, he's really kind of risky to me. This week with Ben Roethlisberger being back, though, I feel like the whole Steelers wide receiver core is going to be doing great this week just because they have Ben Roethlisberger back. The thing that scares me about him is I'm not sure if Antonio Brown is going to get the bulk of the receptions. I mean, I know that he's going to be throwing a lot, but it scares me a little bit. But this is kind of risky. But if he does go off, he's going to go off big. So I really like Martavis Bryant this week. I'm going to have him in a bunch of my lineups. So I think he'll be worth the risk. And Stephon Diggs, again, only $4,200. Um, I don't even know what to say. He's just good. I mean, he's the number one wide receiver for Minnesota. He put up big numbers for us last week, and at $4,200, I think you got to put him in there and save some money for a bigger, another big flex player. But for wide receivers, that's really it. Besides, I'll talk about some deeper picks at the end. At tight end, I'm not going to spend much time talking about Ladarius Green. He's $3,000. I'll be starting him if Antonio Gates doesn't start again, which is likely. He put up 18 points last week, and he gives us a big relief for salary cap, and that's why I'm definitely going to roster him. Now, if Antonio Gates does play, then I will most likely just be moving up to another player at $3,000 for tight end. For defenses, I really like the Rams defense this week. I really wish they weren't $5,100. That just kills me. I've been looking at defenses, and there's really not much out there. I just can't get over the fact that they're $5,100. They're going up against a Browns defense that has just been terrible, and I would expect to see a lot of turnovers and a lot of points for the Rams defense this weekend. So I'm hoping by getting a couple guys that are really low priced that I can squeeze them in there. If not, I'll most likely be going with the Panthers defense. They're going up against the Colts, and Andrew Luck has been throwing picks every game, and I'm just hoping that they can take one back for a touchdown. Okay, now for some of my other picks that I really like at the other positions. At QB, again, I really like Teddy Bridgewater here with Stephon Diggs. I think that they'll be a good matchup, and I think Teddy Bridgewater will be good for another 24-point game. Andy Dalton is a big one. He's having a huge game. I like pairing him up with Martin Jones. He's a really cheap pick that I really like, and it's a risky play, but it could pay off. Jameis Winston, I like him with Mike Evans a lot. As seeing what they did last week, I think they can do that again. Ben Roethlisberger, I think you can stack with Martavis Bryant or even Antonio Brown again this week. Doug Martin is another cheap running back that should be going off again this week. He faces a weak defense. At tight end, I like Martellus Bennett a lot if he can catch some passes this week. Gronk's going to put up 30 points. I mean, it's just his thing. Delaney Walker can put up a good amount of points. He put up 14 last week. I had him in a couple of my lineups. Amari Cooper is a really good wide receiver. It just depends on how David Carr does. David Carr is another sneaky quarterback that you could sneak in there and play. I think I'm going to do it in a couple of my lineups. Danny Woodhead, he put up about 20 points last week too, and I'd like him again this week.